In the quiet town of Chase City, Virginia, where neighbors greet each other and kids play outside, a dark secret was hiding behind a friendly facade. What began as a mutual agreement between two couples quickly turned into a nightmare filled with betrayal and murder. Join us as we explore the heartbreaking story of Jones and Janice, and Martinez and Susan, whose lives were forever changed by a shocking act of violence. Welcome to True Crime Case Documentary, where we dive deep into the most shocking and twisted crime stories, exposing the dark secrets hidden behind seemingly normal lives. In today's episode, we explore the tragic and disturbing story of two couples whose peaceful lives in the quiet town of Chase City, Virginia, were torn apart by an obsession that spiraled out of control, ultimately leading to the brutal murder of an innocent woman. This is the story of Jones and Janice, along with Martinez and Susan Thomas, friends turned enemies in a case that shook the entire community. Chase City, located in the heart of Virginia, was the picture of small-town America. It was a place where everyone knew each other and life moved at a relaxed pace. Jones and Janice, a married couple in their late 30s, were good friends with Martinez and Susan Thomas. Both couples were well respected in the community, attending local events and social gatherings together. To outsiders, their friendship seemed perfect, an ideal bond of trust and loyalty. But behind the surface of this picture-perfect friendship, trouble was brewing. However, there was a secret that only the four of them shared, a consensual wife-swapping arrangement that had added a spark of excitement to their otherwise ordinary lives. In the beginning, everyone involved was on the same page. It was understood that what happened between the couples stayed private. The thrill of this new adventure brought a fresh excitement to their relationships, making their once predictable lives feel exciting again. But what started as harmless fun quickly took a dark turn. Jones, who was typically a calm and stable man with a steady job, found himself increasingly drawn to Jennifer. The connection he felt with her was unlike anything he'd ever experienced before. What began as simple admiration soon turned into an overwhelming obsession. He started craving her presence and longed for any stolen moment they could spend together. As his infatuation deepened, his behavior became more erratic and unpredictable. Janice, his wife, noticed the change in him and grew worried, but she was too wrapped up in the excitement of their new arrangement to fully understand how serious the situation had become. Meanwhile, Susan, on the other hand, began to feel the strain of their agreement. What once felt exciting now made her uncomfortable. She noticed Jones's unsettling behavior, how he always sought her attention, the way he would stare at her when he thought no one was watching, and his subtle but constant attempts to keep her away from her husband Martinez. All these signs pointed to something much more troubling. Feeling uneasy, Susan confided in Martinez about her growing discomfort and her desire to end the wife-swapping arrangement. Martinez, being a supportive husband, agreed, but they both knew that discussing this with Jones and Janice wouldn't be easy. When Susan finally found the courage to tell Jones she wanted to end things, his reaction caught her off guard. Instead of being understanding, Jones became desperate, begging her not to stop the arrangement. His obsession with her had taken hold, and the thought of losing her pushed him to the edge of madness. Determined to create distance, Susan stood firm, but it was clear this wasn't over. The tension between the two couples grew, and Martinez and Susan began to distance themselves from Jones and Janice. Social gatherings that had once been joyful were now tense, and their once strong friendship began to fall apart under the pressure of Jones's growing obsession. Janice, aware of her husband's feelings, found herself stuck between her loyalty to Jones and an increasing sense of fear about what could happen next. As the days turned into weeks, the situation only worsened. Jones's behavior became increasingly erratic. He started showing up unexpectedly at Susan's workplace, leaving cryptic messages on her phone, and even lurking outside her house at strange hours. Growing more fearful for her safety, Susan confided in Martinez, who urged her to go to the police. However, in a small town like Chase City, where everyone knew each other, Susan hesitated, hoping Jones would eventually calm down. Then one fateful evening, the situation escalated beyond anyone's worst fears. While taking a bath, Susan was startled by a noise in her home. She called out for Martinez, thinking he had returned from running errands, but there was no answer. Before she could react, Jones burst into the bathroom, his face twisted with desperation and rage. In that moment, all of Susan's fears came crashing down as she realized the depth of Jones's obsession. In a fit of uncontrollable fury, Jones attacked Susan, his hands closing around her throat as he forced her underwater. The struggle was brief but brutal, and within moments, Susan's life was tragically snuffed out, her body floating lifelessly in the tub. Jones, panting and drenched in sweat, stood over her, slowly grasping the horrifying reality of what he had just done. Panicking, he knew he needed to cover up the crime. He called Janice, who arrived at the scene in shock. Seeing Susan's lifeless body, Janice's first instinct was to flee, but Jones, driven by a twisted sense of self-preservation, convinced her they had to hide the evidence. Driven by loyalty to her husband and fear of the consequences, Janice reluctantly agreed. The couple quickly devised a plan to stage Susan's death as an accident. They scrubbed the bathroom clean and arranged her body to make it look like she had slipped and drowned. However, despite their frantic efforts, there were too many loose ends and inconsistencies that would ultimately unravel their web of lies. When Martinez returned home and discovered Susan's body, his world shattered. The police were called and an investigation began. Initially, the death was treated as a tragic accident. As the investigation continued, the pressure increased on Jones and Janice. The police were now convinced that Susan's death was not accidental and began piecing together the timeline of events, revealing discrepancies in the couple's stories. The tight-knit community of Chase City was left in shock as the hidden secrets of these seemingly ordinary couples came to light. The inconsistencies in Jones's and Janice's stories became too obvious to ignore. What initially seemed like a tragic accident was now clearly something much more disturbing. The detectives assigned to the case were experienced, and they knew that the truth has a way of coming out, no matter how much it is hidden. Evidence began to pile up against Jones. Bruises on Susan's neck that didn't match a simple fall, the lack of water in her lungs indicating she was already dead before being placed in the tub, and the frantic, almost desperate attempts by Jones and Janice to clean the crime scene. As the investigation pressure mounted, Jones started to crack. He had always been someone who valued routine and control, but now his life was spiraling out of control. He became increasingly paranoid, thinking the police were watching his every move and that his neighbors were gossiping about him behind his back. The once confident and composed man was now just a shadow of his former self, haunted by the knowledge of what he had done. Janice was also struggling under the heavy burden of her guilt. Janice had always been the more emotionally resilient of the two, able to compartmentalize her feelings and maintain a calm exterior. But the reality of her involvement in Susan's murder was slowly eating away at her. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw Susan's lifeless body floating in the tub. The nightmares were relentless, serving as a constant reminder of the terrible acts she had helped cover up. The breaking point came when the police brought both Jones and Janice in for questioning, but separately. Their strategy was straightforward: isolate them, apply pressure, and watch as their stories began to differ. And differ they did. Under intense scrutiny, Janice's resolve started to crumble. The detectives exploited her guilt, subtly suggesting that Jones had manipulated her and that she was just as much a victim as Susan. It was a risky tactic, but it worked. After hours of questioning, Janice finally broke down. She could no longer maintain the facade. Through sobs and gasps, she confessed her role in the crime, revealing how Jones had murdered Susan in a fit of rage and how she had helped him cover it up out of fear and misplaced loyalty. This confession would seal their fate, but it also brought Janice a sense of relief, allowing her to unburden herself from the guilt that had consumed her. With Janice's confession, the police arrested Jones and charged him with first-degree murder. Janice was also charged, but with the lesser offense of obstruction of justice, given her role in the events. The news of Jones and Janice's arrest sent shockwaves through Chase City. The community, which had once admired the couples, now recoiled in horror as the gruesome details of the crime came to light. The story dominated local news, and as word spread, it became a regional sensation. The trial that followed was one of the most closely watched in Virginia's history. Every day, the courtroom was packed with members of the public, journalists, and even those who had once considered Jones and Janice friends, all eager to see how the drama would unfold. The prosecution's case was robust, built on a solid forensic evidence, Janice's confession, and testimonies from those who had witnessed Jones's increasingly erratic behavior in the days leading up to the murder. Martinez, the man who lost his wife to this twisted tragedy, was a constant presence in the courtroom. His grief was palpable, but so was his determination to see justice served. He listened intently to every testimony and examined every piece of evidence, his eyes fixed on Jones, who now appeared defeated, his once confident demeanor replaced by a hollow stare. On the other hand, the defense attempted to portray Jones as a man driven to madness by an uncontrollable obsession. They argued that his horrific actions were the result of a mental break rather than premeditated intent. However, the jury saw through this defense. The evidence was clear. Jones had murdered Susan in cold blood, fueled by a deadly mix of obsession and rejection. After days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Jones was found guilty of first-degree murder, and the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Janice, who had cooperated with the investigation and shown genuine remorse for her actions, received a 10-year prison sentence for obstruction of justice. This lighter sentence surprised many, but the judge considered her confession and the role Jones had played in manipulating her. For Martinez, the verdict was a bittersweet victory. Justice had been served, but it could never bring back the woman he loved or restore the life they had built together. While he found some solace in knowing that those responsible for Susan's death would pay for their crimes, the pain of her loss would never fully heal. In the aftermath of the trial, Chase City struggled to move on from the darkness that had engulfed it. The once close-knit community was now divided by suspicion and mistrust. The scandal exposed the secrets and lies lurking beneath the surface of its seemingly perfect facade, forever changing the town. Jones and Janice faded into obscurity, their names forever tainted by the crime they committed. For the residents of Chase City, the story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that the darkness of the human soul can lurk behind even the most ordinary lives. As we close this chapter on this true crime case, we are left to ponder the tragic consequences of unchecked desire and the lengths to which some will go to satisfy their darkest impulses. The story of Jones, Janice, Martinez, and Susan Thomas will linger in the minds of those who hear it, serving as a stark reminder of the thin line between fantasy and obsession and how easily it can be crossed with devastating results. The story of Jones and Janice, along with Martinez and Susan, imparts several crucial lessons about human relationships and behavior. It underscores the dangers of obsession, illustrating how admiration can quickly spiral into something harmful if unchecked. The importance of communication becomes evident as the couple's failure to express their feelings contributed to escalating tensions and misunderstandings. Furthermore, the narrative highlights the devastating consequences of betrayal, which shattered their friendships and forever altered their lives. The impact of secrets is also significant, demonstrating how hidden truths can erode the facade of a perfect friendship. Trust, once broken, is shown to be fragile and difficult to rebuild. Additionally, the story reveals how a community can be affected by scandal, leading to divisions and mistrust among neighbors. Ultimately, it serves as a powerful reminder of personal accountability, as both Jones and Janice had to confront the repercussions of their choices, reinforcing the idea that individuals must